Sudan pays more than $330 million as part of a deal for it to be removed from U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. In a daring attack, armed men free more than 1,000 prisoners from a jail in eastern DR Congo. And we look at how local innovation continues to play a key role in efforts to contain COVID-19 in South Africa. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and joining us with the highlights of business news is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. We'll be looking at how Egypt has lured investors amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And Nigeria's inflation rate hits its highest level in more than 2 years. All that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you.
Thank you, Uche. And we begin tonight in Sudan. The North African country has transferred the compensation it has agreed to pay United States victims of militant attacks and their families. Sudan's Central Bank Governor Mohamed Al-Fatih Zein al-Abidine has confirmed that the payment of $335 million has been made. The transfer is part of a deal with Washington to get Sudan off its list of state sponsors of terrorism. On Tuesday, Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok said he was ready to pay, welcoming plans by the United States President Donald Trump to drop the terrorism listing.
Negotiations over a deal to remove Sudan from a list of state of sponsors of terrorism have been ongoing for years now. The United States added Sudan to its list in 1993. The U.S. believed Omar al-Bashir's government was supporting militant groups. Additional sanctions have hampered efforts by Sudan's transitional government to revive the economy.
Last year, we started a serious discussion with the American administration to remove Sudan's name from the list of countries sponsoring terrorism. I spent the whole of last year in constant contact with the Sudanese people, telling you that we have come close to this moment, the moment of removing Sudan's name from that list. And today, this was achieved. We were able to reverse these punishments from $10 billion or more to a few hundred million.
On Monday, through a tweet, President Donald Trump signaled that America could lift Sudan from the list, hailing it as a big step for the people of Sudan. U.S.-Sudanese negotiations have focused on compensation that Washington wants Khartoum to pay to victims of al-Qaeda attacks on U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. The terror listing has been a major hurdle for Sudan to access foreign financing.
This decision qualifies Sudan to get relief from debt. We are today more than $60 billion in debt. With this decision, doors open that allow for the relief of Sudan's debt.
Many in Sudan feel the decision has been overdue. They say Bashir was removed last year, and Sudan has long cooperated with the United States on counter-terrorism.
The Sudanese people have never supported terrorism. That was something linked to the old regime. We are a peaceful people, and we hope that thanks to your help, Sudan will be removed from that list.
The deal could also set in motion steps by Sudan toward establishing diplomatic relations with Israel, following similar U.S. brokered moves in recent weeks by the UAE and Bahrain. But a key sticking point in talks has been Sudan's insistence that any announcement of Khartoum's delisting not be explicitly linked to normalization with Israel. Re-establishing relations between Israel and another Arab country would give Trump a new diplomatic achievement as he seeks re-election on the 3rd of November. Chom Hono, CGTN.
And staying with Sudan, the transitional government says it is ready to cooperate with the International Criminal Court. The ICC's prosecutor is in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, for 4 days of talks with Sudan's government over alleged war crimes committed by former President Omar al-Bashir in the Darfur region. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
This is the first visit by the International Criminal Court or ICC officials to Sudan since former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted and jailed last year. The ICC says its prosecutor is discussing with Sudanese authorities how to bring justice for the victims of crimes committed in Darfur by Omar al-Bashir's government. The ICC says it also wants to find ways on how to cooperate with the Sudanese judiciary on issues related to Darfur. Former President Omar al-Bashir is currently facing a number of charges in Sudan's courts, including for corruption. The ICC team is also discussing how to collect evidence against Sudanese people suspected of committing crimes by the prosecutor in the Hague-based court. The peace deal signed by the Sudanese parties in September dictates that the Khartoum government cooperates with the ICC. Former President al-Bashir is indicted by the ICC with other officials of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. In 2009 and 2010, the Hague-based court issued arrest warrants for the then Sudan's President al-Bashir. The conflict in Darfur has killed an estimated 300,000 people. Omar al-Bashir's lawyer has repeatedly denounced the court's charges against the former president as politically motivated. Patrick Koyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
To Guinea, and vote counting is still underway after a peaceful presidential election over the weekend. There have been some reports of violence in the aftermath of the polls. Guinea's electoral authority has, in the meantime, dismissed opposition leader Cellou Diallo's claim of victory in Sunday's election.
For the CENI, whether it's by Cellou Diallo or any other candidate who proclaims himself the winner, it is null and void. The CENI is waiting for the results from the Administrative Commission for the centralization of votes. The proclamation, which is official and which is provisionally recognized by the institutions, is the one with the results proclaimed by the CENI Guinea, and after that, the results will be proclaimed by the Constitutional Court.
ECOWAS has dispatched a crisis mission to Cote d'Ivoire to counter rising tensions as election campaigns continue. The tense political climate comes ahead of a presidential election at the end of the month. Joy Kiruki with more details.
The ECOWAS mission came to an end on Monday after a meeting with outgoing President Alassane Ouattara and the three main opposition leaders. Led by the President of the ECOWAS Council of Ministers, Charlie Ayokor Botchway, and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ghana, the mission aims to contribute to the normal continuation of the electoral process in Cote d'Ivoire.
We engaged political parties, the opposition. We engaged the independent candidate. We also engaged a group of ambassadors, still to find out whether they have any concerns, and also to caution everybody about violence and the need to make sure that this election is held in a very peaceful atmosphere.
Since the opposition's call for civil disobedience, demonstrations have been staged in several towns in the interior of the country and in the capital, Abidjan.
It is really unfortunate that it is always others who come to the rescue of Cote d'Ivoire, and this is a problem that has been going on for 27 years now. ECOWAS will not do things for us because it is up to us, the people of Cote d'Ivoire. It is up to us, political leaders, to show the right path for our country. We need to dialogue, sit down and talk to each other. But why do we find it difficult to understand this?
Despite the ECOWAS mission meeting with the opposition, the demonstrators continue to implement the active boycott launched by the main opposition leaders. Faced with this situation, the ECOWAS mission has launched an appeal to the demonstrators.
To supporters of political parties, please do not allow yourselves to be used to do any acts that are violent, such as blocking roads, such as seizing electoral materials, such as attacking people, because it is not worth it.
A joint mission of ECOWAS, the African Union and the United Nations visited Abidjan early October to promote a peaceful, transparent and credible election.
The wish of most people in Cote d'Ivoire is that the Ivorian political class will find common ground before the election scheduled for October 31st, 2020. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says his administration's prime job is guaranteeing peace and security for citizens. Addressing lawmakers in parliament, Abiy also said despite COVID-19 challenges, the country has registered 6.1% economic growth. Here's CGTN's Gurum Chala with more.
On this much-anticipated year-opener event of the parliament, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed talked about several issues: peace and security, the economy, and COVID-19 issues, among others. On the recent killings of civilians in Western Ethiopia, the Prime Minister says the work of security forces to put the situation under control has yielded results.
We have arrested hundreds and many have fled after staging attacks in Western Ethiopia. Unless our security forces have done a lot to clean the area from insurgents. But this is not enough. We also admit we have to dry the source of this trouble. If not, we know it comes back and forth. Therefore, in order to tackle the security threat seen in Benishangul Gumuz today and maybe in other parts tomorrow, we need to work on the political and social sectors. Nothing should stand on the way of Ethiopia's development journey.
On the heavy desert locust invasion in parts of the country, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said coordinated works are being done to minimize loss in the agriculture sector.
If locusts destroy what we have worked in this year, it will hard hit our economy and could also bring hunger. So we won't ignore it for a second. The work we have started earlier is already bearing fruit. We have now brought in planes and helicopters, and we will work to halt the spread where it's now with the minimum damage possible.
The Prime Minister's report to MPs has also indicated that an economic growth of about 6.1% has been registered over the last Ethiopian budget year. The service, agriculture, industrial and health sectors have significantly contributed for the growth. And this is despite the damaging COVID-19 outbreak. Opening the economy further and returning students to schools is the next job.
As you'll know, in Ethiopia, there are more than 30 million students. This is one generation. We cannot kill this generation. If we are unable to educate this youth with the implementation of all precautionary measures, we can never achieve Ethiopia's prosperity. So we are not only attempting to open up schools, but also we have built more than 60,000 classrooms through volunteers. Ministry of Education has prepared 52 million washable face masks and they are being distributed. Students across the country will return to schools with all precautionary measures implemented in schools.
This year, Ethiopia has a lot on its table to undertake. One is the general elections hoped to be staged in the next few months. The country's electoral board has already said it has finished all preparations and will announce exact dates of voter registration and vote casting soon enough. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government has promised the elections will be free, fair and credible. Gurum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. In a daring attack, armed men free more than 1,000 prisoners from a jail in eastern DR Congo. And we look at how local innovations continue to play a key role in efforts to contain COVID-19 in South Africa.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shiwishi, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To the Democratic Republic of Congo, where armed men have freed more than 1,300 prisoners from a jail in the eastern part of the country. The local mayor has blamed an Islamist militant group that operates in the area for the coordinated attack early Tuesday. Joy Kiruki with the details of that report.
The Kangbai Central Prison in Beni, Eastern DRC, the target of Tuesday's attack. Inside its walls, the damage is evident. The early morning attack resulted in the freeing of prisoners by suspected militants.
Before the escape, the prison contained 1,456 prisoners. For now, only 110 remain. About 20 of them have already returned. Others are still returning, and at the end of the day, we will have a fixed number. Those who returned said they were forced to escape, and most of our government soldiers who chose to return did not serve with the enemy in the bush.
According to Wakanamaha, it was a simultaneous attack mounted on the prison and the military camp defending it.
We deplore the fact that many of the detained people prosecuted for serious acts were taken by the ADF assailants to an unknown destination in the direction of the bush on Tuesday at around 4 a.m.
Here's the 12.7 army cartridge used by the enemy. They really hit us. They are not the Mai Mai fighters, but rather the ADF Nalu rebels with whom we are fighting in the bush.
The Allied Democratic Forces is a Ugandan armed group that has been active in eastern Congo since the 1990s. UN figures put at more than 1,000 the number of civilians killed by the group since the start of 2019. During Tuesday's attack, 2 inmates were shot dead, police said on Twitter.
We were sleeping in the morning, but around 4 a.m. we heard serious gunfire, but we decided to hide and to continue serving our sentences and eventually return to society. Those who left, for the most part, were those who were condemned to serving very heavy sentences over 20 years. May the state have pity on us because we voluntarily stayed here in the prison.
Escapes are a common occurrence in the DRC's overcrowded prisons. In June 2017, a similar number of prisoners escaped when the same jail was attacked. A year ago, the army launched a massive counterinsurgency campaign against the ADF. The group retaliated by abandoning its bases, splitting into smaller groups and attacking civilians. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
The World Food Programme is calling for urgent access to be granted to aid groups in the Sahel region. The UN body has warned that without intervention, parts of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger could be facing catastrophic levels of hunger. CGTN's Joy Kiruki with the details.
Violence and insecurity has forcibly displaced people from across the Sahel. Their numbers have risen from 70,000 2 years ago to nearly 1.6 million currently. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are at the front lines of the world's fastest growing displacement crisis. Now they are staring at extreme hunger due to the drought ravaging parts of the Sahel region. Officials from the UN World Food Programme have warned about the lack of access to the affected area.
We expect out of the conference is some firm commitments, some firm political commitments to the region in terms of guaranteeing basic humanitarian access to humanitarian actors. We expect to see a shift in how the international community responds to the Central Sahel. So to move away from what has been a primarily or overly securitized, militarized response to the crisis, and start recognizing that a militarized response to a complex crisis is not going to address the underlying causes of the crisis.
Due to insecurity which has hampered the work of humanitarian groups, many communities are now unable to access life-saving assistance.
So if you compound an already fragile situation, the COVID, exacerbating natural disasters, the deteriorating crisis, you see the risks that this region faces for severe humanitarian crisis in the years to come if we don't continue to build on our response, our humanitarian and development assistance.
World Food Programme is also calling for solutions on how to engage with local communities and groups in order to open up safe passageways to deliver aid.
We believe there are about 11,000 people now in phase 5 famine condition, and we don't have access to it. If we can get to them, we can not only save their lives, but we can also change their lives.
The UN is hoping to raise $1 billion for the 3 countries at the epicenter of the humanitarian crisis. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Many parents in Africa are unable to work regularly due to layoffs and business shutdown caused by coronavirus pandemic. In Kenya, some children in the capital Nairobi have turned to working in quarries and rubbish dumps to help support their families. The United Nations has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic seriously risks setting back gains made in the fight against child labor.
12-year-old Elimanta Mwikali has acquired a new skill since she stopped going to school. This is after the Kenyan government ordered schools shut as part of measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Mwikali works at a quarry with her mother Florence Mombua and siblings. The work is back-breaking, risky and dangerous, but the 34-year-old mother says it is the only way for survival.
When we learned that the coronavirus had spread to Kenya, I lost my job. I have to work with them because they need to eat, yet I make little money. When we work as a team, we can make enough money for our breakfast and lunch.
In another part of the capital, Nairobi, 15-year-old Dominic Munyoki and 17-year-old Mohamud Nasur rummaged through Kenya's largest landfill, scavenging for scrap metal to sell.
We usually help each other out financially. Now that schools are about to open, he contributes some money that I can use to take so I can pay for his brothers and sisters' school uniforms, books, and school fees.
The UN warns that millions of children are at risk of being forced into labor, and school closures could exacerbate the problem.
Kids are a cheap source of labour, and what this has meant in places like Kenya is that children are out there doing really menial hard tasks. They're in quarries, they're on the streets, they're all the places where children shouldn't actually be. And again, not only are they at risk in those places, but they're mostly at risk that they won't return to school. UNICEF has learnt from things like Ebola, the longer kids are out of school, the more likely for the poorest, yet again the poorest, won't actually return.
UNICEF predicts that the world could see the first rise in the number of working children since 2000. Chamhono, CGTN.
Innovation continues to play a key role in South Africa's efforts to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. Locally made ventilators, for example, helped save many lives when there was a shortage of such equipment internationally. CGTN's Travis Andrews reports on how the country is focusing on improving its local capacity to produce much-needed medical equipment and technology.
Prior to the onset of COVID-19 in the country, South Africa was importing more than 90% of all medical devices. However, since the pandemic hit, the country was forced to build capacity internally. That led to the Ventilator Project, a government-driven initiative to bring stakeholders together to design and build a local non-invasive ventilator. Through those efforts, the Life Ventilator was created. Now more than 10,000 of them have been sent to public health facilities for use, and the project has been hailed as a huge success.
The South African tech industry was very agile. They jumped on board, people from manufacturing sector, people from aeronautical sector, people from defense, people from chemical engineering, civil engineering, all of them put their capacities together to create solutions. And they were not hesitant to collaborate. That is a key essence of success, especially in a time of pandemic. And South Africans were very collaborative in getting the solution.
The ventilator, though, spurred growth and innovation across the broader biotech value chain, as non-reusable patient circuits also had to be either sourced internationally or locally made. Looking inwards, the capacity was eventually found, and across the sector, more and more companies provided local solutions to the challenges the country faced.
Well, in the health tech space and the biotech space, there's an enormous amount of work that's been going on recently, and a lot of that stimulated through COVID, but a lot of that work was already in play, but just now accelerated with COVID. So pieces of work where we've seen huge gains in the last few months are tracking and recording of people and systems, and that's whether that's for your workplace to support your staff, specifically the frontline workers.
COVID-19 test kits, though, are also playing an important role in surveillance and detection. Cape Biofarms use innovation to plug a gap in the market by turning to a distant relative of the tobacco plant to create fast, affordable antibody tests.
It forced us to develop local capacity, local networks. We connected with local kit manufacturers. We've also been connecting with local universities. So definitely, I think inadvertently, it did cause us to all kind of, look at what we have around us. And we couldn't really rely on imports.
The National Ventilator Project success has been seen as not just a prime example of what can be achieved when all stakeholders work together, but how it can be adapted by the rest of the continent. If barriers attaining critical medical devices make combating COVID-19 that much more difficult. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
New breakthroughs have been made in the battle against COVID-19 as China doubles down in the global race to develop an effective vaccine. Several vaccines are in the final trials in the country and are already reporting positive results. Feng Yilei with more.
As more COVID-19 vaccines from across the world are reaching the final stage of testing on humans, 4 Chinese candidates have disclosed their initial results. Chinese officials say the vaccines appear safe after some 60,000 volunteers took part in the trials, and developments won't be halted by mutations of the virus.
In the earlier stages of clinical trials in China, we identified some mild adverse reactions, including pain and swelling at the site of the injection and a transient fever. Now, as the trials have entered the third phase, basically, we've monitored mild side effects and no serious adverse reactions have been reported. The overall situation is relatively good.
China expects to have an annual production of 610 million COVID-19 vaccines by the end of 2020 and plans to further expand that capacity next year to meet the huge demand. The country has already offered emergency use vaccines to protect those most at risk, such as medical workers and customs staff.
In terms of emergencies, China strictly follows the approved plan on the premise of voluntary, informed, and consented use. We've established a strict process in terms of screening volunteers, monitoring adverse reactions, emergency treatments, and post-vaccination tracking. So far, no serious adverse reactions have been reported among all the people receiving emergency vaccines, and no infections have been reported among those who got inoculated before working in high-risk areas.
Right now, Chinese drug makers are also conducting phase 3 trials in several other countries that severely suffer from the pandemic, especially developing countries in Southeast Asia, Africa, and America. That is part of efforts to make COVID-19 vaccines available to all, coming after the country joined COVAX, the global initiative against vaccine nationalism.
Although we're leading the world in vaccine development and have sufficient production capacity, we have decided to join COVAX. The main objective is to promote the equitable distribution of vaccines globally and to ensure that vaccines are available to developing countries. In addition, we also want to encourage other capable countries to join the initiative through our participation.
As the race for vaccine is on across the world, the final step of testing in China is to prove the efficacy and safety of all candidates before seeking approval from regulators. And the Chinese authorities say the country will fulfill its commitment to make any vaccine a global public good. And the aim is to curb the virus and its threat to the health and safety of all people of all countries. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Beijing.
Here now is a reminder of our top story. Sudan has transferred the compensation it has agreed to pay U.S. victims of militant attacks and their families. Sudan Central Bank governor has confirmed that the payment of $335 million has been made. The transfer is part of a deal with Washington to get Sudan off its list of state sponsors of terrorism. West African regional bloc ECOWAS has dispatched a crisis mission to Cote d'Ivoire to counter rising tensions as election campaigns continue. The tense political climate comes ahead of a presidential election at the end of the month. The mission came to an end on Monday after a meeting with President Alassane Ouattara and the three main opposition leaders. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, armed men have freed more than 1,300 prisoners from a jail in the eastern part of the country. The local mayor has blamed an Islamist militant group that operates in the area for the coordinated attack early Tuesday. Well, it's time now to catch up with the latest in business news, and for that we cross over to Uche.
Thanks, Penny. And coming up on Africa Live Bit, we'll be looking at how Egypt has lured investors amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And Nigeria's inflation rate hits its highest level in more than 2 years.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, foreign direct investment flows have dropped dramatically across Africa amid uncertainty caused by the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic. While CGTN's Yasser Hakim examines the role that Egypt's economic reforms have played in bolstering investor confidence.
Foreign direct investments are an important source of income for any government. The inflows create job opportunities, pump foreign currency into the country, add to tax revenue, and enable production goods for local and international markets. The World Bank International Statistics Debt Report shows that Egypt has topped Africa in FDIs since 2017, with an increase of 16% year-on-year in 2019-2020.
There are constant variables that attract investors, like a strong market of over 100 million people with high purchasing power, a good location on 2 seas with easy access for trade and shipments. Lately, the added value is a successful economic reform program that led to stability and withstood challenges like a global recession caused by the coronavirus.
In spite of the COVID-19 outbreak this year, investments kept flowing in. Receipts grew by 11% to surpass $10 billion, while conversely, it contracted by 13% across the continent. Experts say government policies have played a major role in keeping FDIs intact.
The aggressive economic reforms that started in 2016 till 2019 were critical. The financial policies have led to the stability in the Egyptian currency and the foreign exchange markets, which was important for the investor confidence. Secondly, changing laws to facilitate investments in oil and gas and establishing demarcation agreements with Cyprus and Greece in the East Mediterranean and Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea, while setting up proper infrastructure to encourage more business in this sector.
Naturally, oil and gas is leading FDIs in Egypt this year so far, followed by telecommunications and the retail business. However, there are still challenges that hinder many investors from opening shop in the North African nation, mainly the slow and complicated bureaucratic process in spite of the improvements applied to it. If these hurdles are removed, analysts predict higher investment inflows, especially in the industrial sector. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's inflation has jumped to its highest rate in more than 2 years. The spike was driven by an increase in food prices, which was worsened by the outbreak of COVID-19. Now, CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports the upward trend is hampering the ease of doing business in the country.
13.17%. That's Nigeria's latest inflation rate. Figures from the country's Bureau of Statistics show that it's 0.49% up from 13.22% recorded in August. It's the worst rate the West African nation has recorded in almost 3 years. There's been a surge in the cost of food, commodities and services, and there are indications that it could get even worse.
It's very disturbing. Unfortunately, there is no expectation of lower inflation rate in the coming months, in the coming period. We still expect our inflation rate because parameters for increasing price index has really not changed, even though we have started entering harvest season for most of the farm outputs, particularly rice. The price of inputs might have reduced, but because of other factors. In the coming period, we're expecting higher inflation rate. It's worrisome. It means that the value of money is going down, coupled with what is happening with exchange rate. Doing business will become tougher.
The rising inflation's had an impact on consumers, many of whom are hit by the effect of the COVID-19 lockdown, experiencing job losses, pay cuts, or fixed salaries. Consumers' purchasing power has at the same time been on a decline. Economists fault the government's badly clocked policies.
Recall that many organizations have not fully resumed as we speak today. Many of them still work 3 times a week. Some in Lagos, commercial level of the country, still work 2 times a week. Some are not working fully. As a matter of fact, government is not even opening market fully in most states. So there seems to be confusion around economic policy. And that, of course, will be showing, it's already showing in what exchange rate is. It's showing with high inflation. So with all the policies we've made, we should have seen if inflation is increasing, we should have seen reduction in unemployment.
Government's efforts such as farmers' credit facilities and small business funding targets at reducing inflation. But inconsistency in policy execution has hampered notable progress. Experts are now projecting a recession is inevitable and could extend beyond 2020 as cases of insecurity surge. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, it has been 20 years since the establishment of the Forum of the Cooperation between China and Africa, or FOCAC. As the current co-chair of the forum, Senegal is preparing to hold the FOCAC meeting next year in Dakar. Senegal's economic minister shares his opinion on the significance of the FOCAC on the continent. Take a listen.
Since 2000, FOCAC has made it possible to continuously strengthen the friendship between Senegal and China and also bring important results. The volume of our trade has continued to increase since 2000. So in less than 20 years, the volume of trade has multiplied by 20. We went from $10 billion in 2000 to $209 billion in 2019. This is an extremely large increase, and FOCAC has really played a major role in that. And since 2009, China has been Africa's leading trade partner and also the main partner in the context of strategic investments and structuring investments such as ports, power plants, power lines, railways, and other sectors that contribute to Africa's infrastructural catch-up. Africa lags behind in infrastructure and needs massive investment with concessional and semi-concessional financing, and China has therefore played a major role and continues to play a major role. This is appreciated by African states which have privileged relations with China, such as Senegal, for example.
And on the international front, China recently released its third quarter economic data. It shows continued recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the world's second biggest economy saw growth of 4.9% between July and September, and that's compared to the same quarter last year. A South African offshore investment analyst shares his thoughts on how China is now leading the charge for a global recovery based on its latest GDP.
That the global markets have definitely, well, especially the US market has overshot and has not been driven anymore by fundamentals. I think the economic growth, like you say, has been quite slow and is actually contracted, but the stock market has gone up a lot. And I think for China, it's not the same case. In China, they've actually had good economic growth and it's picking up fast because our market is a very small market. Our market is about 1% of the total market cap. So from a diversification point of view, it makes a lot of sense for South Africans to invest in other stock markets, in other economies. We believe, for instance, the Chinese market has definitely got great opportunity. I think not just because it's a big economy, but because of the work ethic that Chinese people tend to have, the discipline they've got, the education. So you've got a very well-educated workforce with a motivated and driven. I think that makes a very good investment case for China.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, it is just a matter of time before President Donald Trump removes Sudan from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. Of course, we'll bring you more on that at top of the hour. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up after the break, how one South African organization is extending vital support to those with visual impairment.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Congo, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Blindness is the leading cause of disability in South Africa. There is more than 500,000 visually impaired people in the country. Most depend on others to help with everyday tasks and to get around. This prevents them from being self-sufficient, accessing education or working. An organization called the South African Mobility Trust has spent over 30 years trying to change this through training for blind people to manage their lives better. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Lesedi Maruma was not born blind. She lost her sight during an operation 12 years ago. Since that day, her world has been turned upside down.
The doctors told me that I'm not going to recover. I will never get my sight back. It came to me as a shock, and then I nearly even take my life because it was so difficult for me.
Maruma mustered the courage to adjust to her disability, but still depends on others to help her.
Sometimes it's so frustrating, you know, when people, they're doing their own things, then you want to get something, you must ask. And then it's like, I don't even know some of my grandchildren. I only know their voices. How do they look like? I don't know. And then I'm a person who likes to do my own things. I want to be like active. Like now, I lost my job. I need to make an extra income for myself.
To become more self-reliant, blind people join a 3-month training program run by the South African Mobility for the Blind Trust.
This training, using the white cane, for example, actually helps you heal. It helps you to accept that I'm blind, but it's not the end of the world, because I can learn how to get myself around. I can learn to do things. You know, otherwise, as a blind person, you're stuck at home, you can't do anything, you can't go anywhere.
I did like the South African mobility training because twice a week I used to go out to the streets and learn how to go to the shops. And also I was getting exercises.
Maruma still hopes for a miracle but may never be able to work again, like most blind people in South Africa. Maruma is among 4,000 people helped by the trust who mainly live in townships and rural areas and cannot afford caregivers. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Uganda, students with special needs are pushing to catch up with studies ahead of end-of-term exams to be held early next year. While most students were able to continue learning online and via television during the lockdown, many of those with special needs missed out because they did not have teaching aids. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
These students need special attention. They have a hearing impairment. They have been home for close to 7 months. The Ugandan government closed schools in March as a measure to protect them from COVID-19.
Most of the children have been learning at home. They have been watching TVs, but for our case, we didn't have interpreters to interpret for them on the TV. So sitting at home for a long time, it has brought them a little bit behind. So we have to begin afresh and then we bring them up.
And as they study hard to recover lost time, they also have to observe the new guidelines set by the country's health ministry. These include washing their hands frequently, wearing a mask, and recording their temperature. Before the outbreak of COVID-19, this class could accommodate about 50 learners, but now it's half empty. Teachers here say they're encouraging students to maintain social distance so that they can reduce the spread of the virus. But teachers say some of the measures are a barrier to special needs learning.
When you are putting on a mask while teaching, there is no way you can do facial communication, because for us we learn through total communication. As in, I have to sign as I speak. And right now I covered my face, but how will I show my face to the pupils?
And as the school moves to adjust to the new normal, students are also reading hard to catch up.
When I'm coming to school to learn, first I have to wash my hands, I enter and learn. And I read my books.
Parents are also upbeat about the reopening of schools.
My son was anxious to return to school. He was not studying at home. He wanted a sign language teacher.
Figures from the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, show that about 2.5 million children in Uganda live with some form of disability. Teachers are hoping that before exams kick off in 4 months' time, they will have covered much of the school's syllabus to enable their students pass primary leaving exams. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And ahead in sports. Ghana football team records more COVID-19 cases after international marches.
How would you create your legend?